Hands of the Cause of God appointed by the guardian of the Baha'i Faith, Shoghi Effendi. Belonging to a divinely ordained institution, initiated by Baha'u'llah in the latter years of his ministry towards the end of the 19th century, these heroic souls, elevated to the rank of Hand of the Cause of God by the guardian, had followed Abdu'l-Baha's exhortation to diffuse the divine fragrances on their many travels and duties, assigned to them initially by their beloved guardian and later by the Universal House of Justice. These encounters had left the believers imbued with love for the central figures of the faith of Baha'u'llah and an unfailing devotion towards Shoghi Effendi. They had propelled them into active service to the world of humanity. They had proclaimed the message of Baha'u'llah to diverse peoples, from dignitaries and intellectuals to common and simple folk. The modest aim of the producers of this series is to provide a glimpse of these rare individuals in various settings around the world, to listen to their words and deeds, and so create the atmosphere of what it may have been like to be in their presence and partake of their knowledge and wisdom. In refreshing our memories of these chosen souls, we may perhaps find further inspiration for our own lives. As very little audio-visual material has been found on the Hands of the Cause of earlier periods, of necessity, these recordings are limited to those Hands of the Cause appointed by the guardian, and for the most part, those who survived their beloved leader after 1957. Esslingen in Germany. In this beautiful spot, Baha'is and their friends gathered together for a summer school in 1936, a time for relaxation and learning. Amongst them was Hermann Grossmann, later to be appointed a Hand of the Cause in the first contingent announced by the guardian. Also the young Mary Maxwell of Montreal, who was visiting Germany with her illustrious mother, May Maxwell, and who was to marry Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i Faith, the following year, to become known as Abdu'l-Baha, Ruhiyya Khanum. She too would be elevated to the rank of Hand of the Cause of God. Many other prominent Baha'is were also present, including a young Adalbert Mühlschlägl, giving a talk at one of the sessions to an audience that had overflowed beyond the small room to the outside veranda. Years later, the guardian praised Dr. Mühlschlägl as a pillar of the administrative order in Germany and elevated him to the rank of Hand of the Cause of God. And then there was food to be prepared for the attendees, undertaken not only in a joyful spirit, but also with a keen sense of organization. The time to eat was announced, and the friends gathered for their luncheon. After the washing up, an afternoon period of outdoor relaxation. But this peace and tranquility was soon to change. The official banning of gatherings during Adolf Hitler's rise to power led to orders by the Gestapo to seize Baha'i books and literature and to imprison prominent members. Hermann Grossmann, despite being at the center of much Baha'i activity, was luckily overlooked and was thus able to appear before tribunals as a witness for the defendants, asserting the validity of the faith and its non-political nature. The 100th anniversary of the declaration of the Bab in Shiraz on the 23rd of May 1844 was an event of historic importance. It was in this house that Mullah Hussein attained the presence of the Bab and became the first to believe in him. I sat spellbound by his utterance, oblivious of time, recounted Mullah Hussein. I was enthralled by the music of that voice, which rose and fell as he chanted from the Qayyumul Asma, his commentary on the Surah of Joseph. That historic evening set in motion the unfoldment of a glorious dispensation, referred to by Shoghi Effendi as without parallel in the entire field of religious history. What transpired in this upper chamber was to spread well beyond Shiraz, to the east and the west. A century later, in an epic volume entitled God Passes By, Shoghi Effendi, himself a descendant of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, commemorated this historic event with a survey of the outstanding events of a century that began with the inception of the Babi dispensation, of the inauguration of the Baha'i era, of the commencement of the Baha'i cycle, and the birth of Abdu'l-Baha. George Townsend, then Canon of St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin and Archdeacon of Clonfert, wrote the introduction to this volume and suggested the title, God Passes By. In later years, this devoted supporter and collaborator of Shoghi Effendi, whose scholarship was praised as unmatched in the Baha'i Western world, was honored with the rank of Hand of the Cause of God. In the United States, friends congregated at the House of Worship in Wilmette, in the outskirts of the city of Chicago, to participate in the All-America Baha'i Centenary Program. Following registration, the participants attended the convention session, presided over by members of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States and Canada. After the sessions, the participants emerged from the foundation hall of the House of Worship. Many congregated at the centenary tea tent for luncheon and snacks. Those attending this auspicious event came from across the continent and from many countries abroad. Assembled delegates and friends gathered on the steps in front of the House of Worship for a commemorative photo. The elected National Spiritual Assembly of that year included 6 members who were to be elevated to the rank of Hand of the Cause in later years. They are Leroy Iwas, who at the Guardian's request was to serve him unfailingly in the Holy Land during the last 6 years of his ministry. Louis Gregory and Roy Wilhelm, both of whom devotedly served the Master, Abdu'l-Baha, and were named posthumously as Hands of the Cause by the Guardian. Horace Holly, described by the Guardian as the foremost exponent of Baha'i administration in the world. Dorothy Baker, who was referred to on her passing by the Guardian as the distinguished Hand of the Cause and eloquent exponent of its teachings. And Amelia Collins, who was informed in a cablegram from Shoghi Effendi 2 years after this film was taken of her elevation to the rank of Hand of the Cause. You are the first to hold this honor in lifetime, he said. Representation of Baha'is from other lands and walks of life is also recorded in this historical footage. Meanwhile, in Persia, the cradle of the faith, a smaller, select gathering of members of the National Assembly and convention delegates came together in Shiraz, paid their homage at the house of the Bab in that upper chamber, adorned by a precious silk carpet spread out by the trustee of Huququllah, Mr. Waliullah Varga, as a gift from Shoghi Effendi. Then, at the precise moment of the passage of 100 years, at exactly 2 hours and 11 minutes after sunset, they listened to the chanting of a special message from Shoghi Effendi.
البديع الذي فيه نصب داوم قصره المشيد ونظمه البديع.
This message had been carried from the Holy Land via Baghdad by hand in the final year of the Second World War, by plane to Tehran, and then transported several hundred miles by car to that gathering by Mr. Zikrullah Khodem, who acted as the Guardian's intermediary in Persia. Both Mr. Khodem and Mr. Vadra were to attain the rank of Hand of the Cause of God in later years. On the passing of Mr. Vadra, the Guardian was saddened by the loss of this outstanding Hand of the Cause, and appointed Mr. Vadra's eldest son, Ali Muhammad, to succeed him as trustee of Hukuk, conferring upon him the rank of Hand of the Cause of God. In the Holy Land on this special day, the beloved Guardian unveiled the model of the superstructure of the Shrine of the Bab, which William Sutherland Maxwell, the famous Canadian architect, had designed. Mr. Maxwell, the father of Ruhia Khanum, was invited by the Guardian to come to the Holy Land in 1940, after the passing of his wife, the beloved Baha'i teacher, May Bollis Maxwell, in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Construction of the building began in 1948, and the splendid superstructure was completed in 1953. Mr. Maxwell did not live to see this masterpiece. His death in Montreal on March the 25th, 1952, only 3 months after his appointment as a Hand of the Cause, brought immeasurable grief to the Guardian, who cabled the Baha'i world and paid tribute to his saintly life. The following early teachers of the Baha'i Faith were elevated by Shoghi Effendi to the rank of Hand of the Cause of God in future years.
Today, the world is confronted with the greatest task in human history, the building of a world order and the establishment of universal peace. After thousands of years of warfare and strife, we are challenged to create this new condition. Indeed, it is the requirement of our time, the essential basis for our continuance as a race. To the success of this mighty task, the Baha'i Faith has a unique and vital contribution to make. Its followers believe that it alone contains the pattern for world order. And what is far more significant, the dynamic energy through which this lofty goal may be achieved. For it is evident that no means, but an ideal means, a spiritual power, will heal this world sickness of war, dissension, and discord.
Baha'u'llah has said, "A rose is beautiful in whatsoever garden it appears. All are one in the color and beauty of servitude to him." The Baha'i Faith is divine in origin, all-embracing in scope, free from the insularities of the past. It inclines neither to east nor to west, to Jew nor to Gentile, to rich nor to poor, to black nor to white, to native nor to foreign-born. It is a world community. Such a world community offers two distinct benefits. First, it gives to the entire planet that process of education which a prophet alone can bring to his age. And second, it offers a pattern for communal life which may well be the very foundation of a future society. For example, among the principles of Baha'u'llah is the principle of the oneness of mankind. A worldwide campaign in such an education may be said to be launched at this very hour by the Baha'is everywhere.
The present state of the Baha'i Faith is in the Holy Land at Haifa, Palestine. And from this center, in less than 100 years, the Baha'i Faith is spread throughout the entire earth, to the continent of Europe, Africa, South America, North America, in Asia and Australia. And in the United States, Baha'i Faith is now located in every state in the Union, in every province of Canada, in every country of South America, in Alaska. In over 60 countries of the earth, Baha'is are now consecrating themselves to the establishment of a worldwide commonwealth of nations, enunciated by Baha'u'llah. Now, as we've showed you on all these continents of the earth, Baha'is are dedicating themselves toward securing this supreme world civilization, which will be the fruit of the teachings of Baha'u'llah, whom the Baha'is believe to be the prophet of God for this day.
Geneva, Switzerland, 1948. Delegates from many countries attended the Human Rights Commission held in this city, as did a number of prominent Baha'is. This was at the behest of Shoghi Effendi, intended not only to raise the profile of the international Baha'i community, but also to nurture its active involvement in the various non-governmental forums. Baha'i delegates included Mrs. Mildred Motahedeh and Dr. Ugo Jakeri. Mrs. Motahedeh of the United States took an active role in the evolution of the status of the faith at the United Nations and was praised for her services by the Guardian. Dr. Ugo Jakeri of Italy became one of Shoghi Effendi's trusted aides, helping to secure the marble for the construction of the Shrine of the Bab on Mount Carmel. He was appointed Hand of the Cause of God in 1951. During his visit to America in 1912, Abdu'l-Baha laid with his own hands the cornerstone of the first Baha'i house of worship in the West at Wilmette, Illinois. After more than 40 years, through the selfless and sacrificial efforts of the Baha'i Friends, the house of worship was completed. Among those honored and later elevated to the rank of Hand of the Cause for their contributions was Siegfried Schopflocher. In addition to his devoted services, he pledged major sums to the building works, which, during the Great Depression, constituted very significant amounts. The Guardian referred to him as the chief temple builder. Corinne True, another Hand of the Cause to be, championed the temple project. Following a petition to Abdu'l-Baha to raise funds for the building of the house of worship in America, the master consented and charged Corinne with the responsibility to raise it. It was her tireless and selfless devotion over the next 50 years, in the face of many difficulties, that finally saw the completion of the Mother Temple of the West. She and hundreds of other friends were to witness the official opening. A future Hand of the Cause, Mr. Paul Haney, introduces Abdu'l-Baha, Ruhiya Khanum.
Shoghi Effendi Rabbani, the guardian of the Baha'i Faith, has sent his wife, Abdu'l-Baha Ruhiya Khanum, as his personal representative to present a message of dedication from him as the world leader of the Baha'i Faith.
On behalf of the guardian of the faith of Baha'u'llah, I have the great honor of dedicating this first Mashrak al-Azkar of the Western world to public worship. Initiated 50 years ago, its foundation stone laid by Abdu'l-Baha, the son of the founder of the faith, raised by contributions from its followers all over the world, reared in the vicinity of the first Baha'i center established in the West. This house of worship, now opening wide its doors to peoples of all creeds, of all races, of all nations, and of all classes, is dedicated to three fundamental verities animating and underlying the Baha'i faith: the unity of God, the unity of his prophets, the unity of mankind. I greet and welcome you on behalf of the guardian of our faith within these walls, and invite you to share with us the words recorded in the sacred scriptures, which we believe to be the repositories of the eternal and fundamental truths revealed by God in various ages for the guidance and salvation of all mankind.
The program approved by the Guardian included as readers a number of Hands of the Cause who had been appointed in 1951 and 1952.
Alhamdulillah الذي أنزل الكتاب على عبده بالحق ليكون للعالمين سراجا وهاجا.
Mr. Khadem's chanting from the Qayyum al-Asma, the Bab's commentary on the Surah of Joseph, had been foreshadowed by the Guardian years earlier, when Mr. Khadem was on pilgrimage.
Ya ahlal arz man ata'u zikrallah wa kitabihi hawza faqad ata'u Allah.
Mr. Furatan, a member of the First National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Iran, on which he was to serve on successive occasions as secretary. Mr. Samandari had the unique honor, amongst the existing Hands of the Cause, of having attained the presence of Baha'u'llah.
از جیب قوت برار و این نفوس در گل مانده را نجات ده.
Many Hands of the Cause attended the 4 Intercontinental Conferences called by the Guardian to launch his 10-year teaching plan. These events took place in Kampala, Uganda, Chicago, USA, Stockholm, Sweden, and Delhi, India. The conference in Delhi was held in a huge tent. The Hands of the Cause, amongst those on the podium, addressed the friends gathered and conveyed a message and greetings from the beloved Guardian. Thanks to Mr. Collis Featherston, who attended the conference in Delhi with Mrs. Featherston, we have a quality visual record of that event. Following the conference, Mr. Collis Featherston went on pilgrimage to the Holy Land. His encounter with the beloved Guardian redoubled his commitment to the work of the faith, which he carried out with an energy and vitality that was infectious. He was later appointed a Hand of the Cause of God. Future Hands of the Cause and their families attended the Delhi conference. Hand of the Cause Dorothy Baker and 4 other members of the National Spiritual Assembly of the United States had offered to leave for pioneer posts at the launch of Shoghi Effendi's 10-year global crusade in 1953. The Guardian accepted her choice of Grenada, that she was to pursue with her husband following the New Delhi conference. Tragically, on her return trip from India, her plane exploded in mid-air and crashed into the Mediterranean near the island of Elba, bringing grief to the heart of Shoghi Effendi and the Baha'i world. After the traumatic event of the ascension of Shoghi Effendi in 1957, the Hands of the Cause gathered each November for their annual conclave in the Holy Land. The 1958 Conclave. The Hands taking a rest break from their intensive deliberations. Some of the Hands of the Cause received the guidance of their exalted leader for almost 6 years before his passing. Yet others received the honor only a month before his ascension. In 1963, London was the venue for the First World Congress commemorating the 100th anniversary of the declaration of the Bab in Baghdad, coinciding with the completion of the Guardian's 10-year teaching plan, which was crowned by the formation of the Universal House of Justice. Many Hands of the Cause attended this historic event, and many also addressed the gathering.
الحمدلله زنده ماندیم وعده های الهیه را در الواح و آثار مبارکه به تمامی ملاحظه و زیارت کردیم.
Thank God I have lived to see the fulfillment of the great prophecies in the holy writings.
احباب باید عموماً قلباً روحاً شاد و مسرور باشند.
All the Baha'is, all together in their souls and their spirits, must rejoice this day.
On this day, we cannot but recall that dark day in November when, without any premonition, light went out of our world and we were plunged into darkness and our hearts broke. But in that gloom which surrounded us, dear friends, there shone as bright as ever the beam of our Guardian's guidance.
This is your captain speaking. Our estimated arrival time is now 6:25 p.m. local time. Ground temperature 73 degrees, humidity 85%. We'll be starting our descent in a few minutes. We hope you've enjoyed your flight with us. Fly Trans International again.
They came from many parts of Central and South America and the Caribbean to attend the dedication of the first Baha'i house of worship of Latin America. They came from Europe and Asia, the United States and Canada. Nearly 4,000 Baha'is from all parts of the world congregated at this great gathering in Panama City. So many had come that they had to wait their turn to enter the house of worship and be seated in shifts of 600 people.
I have the great honor and privilege of dedicating the second Mashak al-Azkar of the Western Hemisphere to public worship. The inception of this Baha'i temple took place more than 50 years ago when Abdu'l-Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i Faith, praised the destiny of Panama and foreshadowed that the spread of the Baha'i teachings in this republic would unite the East and the West, the North and the South.
The celebration of this joyous event was to take place in the new gymnasium of Panama, where the attendees assembled for talks, music, and fellowship. Hand of the Cause of God, Abdu'l-Baha Ruhiya Khanum, presided at the opening and closing sessions, also attended by Hands of the Cause Dr. Jakeri and Mr. Khodem.
This principle of oneness and unity that Baha'u'llah has given us is not just something that you mention. It is an organic thing. It is a law of God. Inharmony makes you ill. Disunity makes you ill. It wrecks your family life. It ruins the nerves of your children. It spoils your Baha'i local assembly meetings. It spoils the atmosphere of your feast. It can break up your committees. It can make you sick. It can change your character.
The Panama Conference produced an outpouring of love for Baha'u'llah as participants gathered on stage to dedicate their lives to the service of humanity and to their faith. Hand of the Cause Mr. Khodem expressed his gratitude by going down the line and embracing each and every individual. The Baha'i Youth Conference in Fiche, Switzerland, was a real treat for the many young and not so young people who'd come together in the heart of Europe for the first pan-European youth conference of its kind. The event was blessed by the participation of a number of Hands of the Cause, including Mr. Enoch Olinga, Mr. Abul Qasim Faizi, and Dr. Adalbert Muschlegel, who took part in the proceedings and addressed the audience drawn from virtually all parts of Europe and beyond. This occasion marked an outpouring of emotion by participants as they listened to talks by the Hands of the Cause and as they vowed to dedicate their talents and energies in the field of service. There was also a social side to the event, as the friends attending sought opportunities to meet one another and to rejoice in the beautiful outdoors. Nairobi, Kenya, in October 1976. A joyous conference in the presence of one of Africa's favorite sons, Hand of the Cause, Enoch Olinga.
Right from the outset, I should like to say that the Baha'i this conference, the Baha'i conference, is a very peaceful conference, and that this conference is a mirror reflecting the glories of the kingdom of Baha.
Amongst the friends gathered was Mr. William Sears, who was a speaker at a subsequent session.
I'm saying this because as Baha'is, we believe that love, fellowship, and unity must prevail in the world, because this is the day in which God's holy manifestations appeared to establish these principles in the world so that there will be no more problems amongst the peoples of the world.
Chanzo cha imani ya Baha'i.
Hand of the Cause John Robarts was a third Hand of the Cause at this marvelous gathering. Together they were appointed by Shoghi Effendi in October 1957 as part of the third and final contingent of Hands of the Cause of God, representing the continent of Africa. 19 years later, in Kenya, they came together.
Allahu Akbar. Ya Baha'u'llah. Ya Aliyul Allah. Ya Sahibul Zaman. All battle cries for the spiritual conquest of the hearts of men. Beloved friends, I would, before speaking about anything, like to express my loving appreciation for all of the beautiful flowers and for all of the lovely things we see everywhere in this hall. Everything is filled with memories. Everywhere I look to the greatest name, and I can remember the words of the beloved guardian when I was in the Holy Land on pilgrimage. He said, ours was a faith of superlatives. That's why we say the greatest name, the most great peace, the greatest holy leaf, the most great prison. Superlative. There are no words to say who Baha'u'llah is or what our cause is. If there were better words, we would use those, but we use the best the language has, superlatives.
A few weeks ago, my wife and I were at the Alaskan conference, and it was a glorious one too. It was a 3-day conference of the Indians and Eskimos of Alaska. And when they learned that we were coming on to this conference, the native people asked us to bring their loving greetings to all of you, but they said they would be praying fervently for the success of this conference.
Mr. Masoud Homse, counselor residing in South America, accompanied Bolivian friends gathered for a conference. Subsequently, they were greeted individually by Hand of the Cause, Mr. Abdu'l-Baha Faizi. Mr. Faizi explained the basic teachings of the faith to these simple and pure-hearted individuals.
My name is Martha Many Gray Horses. I'm from Cardston, Alberta, Canada. I live in Washington, D.C. Baha'u'llah answered my prayers. I've arrived home.
This conference of native Baha'is of North America was a most moving occasion, as individual native Indians conveyed their heartfelt emotions to the audience.
What a conference, what a night. I tell you, I couldn't sleep last night. And at 4 or 5, I was awake and prayed. I wanted to express last night my feeling in that powwow. Am I right, powwow?
You're right. Right, perfect, perfect, perfect.
Well, we may call it the powwow of Baha'u'llah. Abdu'l-Baha tells us, what shall we say? Abdu'l-Baha spoke about your destiny. He was not kidding. Do we believe it? I think that our beloved National Spiritual Assemblies of Alaska, Canada, and United States, they were inspired. Baha'u'llah had a wonderful purpose through this conference. They were inspired, and their inspiration moved the Supreme Body of the Faith, the Universal House of Justice, to send their special representative, our beloved Amos Gibson, here to share in this conference, the spirit of the conference.
Every 5 years, during the month of April, the members of National Spiritual Assemblies from around the world gather to cast their ballots for the 9 members of the Universal House of Justice, the supreme body of the Baha'i Faith. Though not voting, the Hands of the Cause of God participated in these events in their capacity as members of the learned arm of the faith, and also observed the celebrations of the Festival of Rezvan, which mark Baha'u'llah's proclamation in Baghdad in April 1863. On the occasion of the International Convention of 1973, in the setting of the historical Baha'i Gardens in the Holy Land, the Hands of the Cause of God found some time to interview one another.
It's a great joy and blessing to be in the Rezwan Garden, listening to the sound of the birds, and to have the pleasure of being with Mr. Paul Haney. Not too many years ago, we did a similar interview in 1953 when this great world plan was launched, the 10-year plan. And I thought it would be marvelous if Paul, who at that time was not only a hand of the cause, but chairman of the National Assembly of the United States, involved with the administration for such a long time, if he'd tell us something about the rise of this administrative order, which, as we all know, is truly the hope of the world. Paul?
Well, actually, the administrative order goes back to the days of Baha'u'llah, when he appointed 4 hands of the cause in his own lifetime. And then in the days of Abdu'l-Baha, the master devoted so much time and effort to establishing the local spiritual assemblies, the boards of consultation, and in training them and teaching them in the true purpose of their existence. And then in the days following the master, the beloved guardian continued to expand the foundations of the administrative order by encouraging the formation of local assemblies. And then in the early 1920s, he came to the point where the number of Baha'i groups, assemblies throughout the world was sufficiently large to permit the formation of national spiritual assemblies. And then finally, in 1953, a date that Mr. Sears referred to at the beginning, the development of the administrative order throughout the world had reached the point where the Baha'i world could, under the guidance and leadership of the beloved guardian, embark on a world crusade. And then at the conclusion of this world crusade, 56 national spiritual assemblies were established throughout the world, 56 pillars of the Universal House of Justice, and in 1963, at the end of that first worldwide plan, the crowning unit of the administrative order of the faith, the Universal House of Justice, was brought into being, was elected, and from that time until the present, the Universal House of Justice launched and carried out the second global plan, the first one under the aegis of the House of Justice itself, the 9-year plan, and that has resulted in raising the number of national spiritual assemblies in the world to 113.
It's very exciting. Could I just say probably a few words as we come to the end of this, that to be the other day on the site of Mount Carmel and seat of the Universal House of Justice, so near to where Baha'u'llah chanted the Tablet of Carmel, the charter of our world institutions, and the marvelous excitement of it all. And then from there I went down to visit the tomb of the greatest holy leaf. It, of course, was a convention of highlights, but one of the most moving moments for me was when we were all gathered there to dedicate the site of the seat of the Universal House of Justice and heard the words of the Tablet of Carmel chanted on that spot, so near to where Baha'u'llah himself chanted it, this tremendous charter of our world institutions for the conquest of the planet. I think probably the thing that moved me most of Baha'u'llah's words at that time was that how he longed to carry the message himself to every city and to every spot on the surface of the world. And I had the feeling that all these national assemblies and continental boards of counselors gathered there with the hands of the cause under the guidance of the House of Justice were going to do just exactly that. And as I was thinking of that, I remembered my last visit to right down the side of the mountain to the shrine of the greatest holy leaf, which the beloved guardian said was a symbol of our administrative order, with the steps, the local assemblies, the pillars, the national assemblies, and now the dome of the Universal House of Justice was on. I was waiting to take pictures, and it was raining very hard. The water was coming down the dome, down the pillars, through the assemblies, out into the garden. And I thought of the words of the beloved guardian when he said that when the Universal House of Justice comes into existence, that it will shed its healing waters upon the warring peoples and nations of the earth, wash away the evils and iniquities of the realm of dust, and heal man's age-old ills and ailments. And I could see that water coming down from the dome, through the national assemblies, to the local assemblies, out into the garden, and there were red flowers and green flowers and yellow flowers, and it was just so beautiful. And it said it would usher in an era the like of which the eyes of men had never seen. And as I stood on the mountain, I knew Baha'u'llah said all the prophecies were fulfilled. They were all completed as they stood on that mountain, and I knew that was what was going to happen to the world. It was going to be like this garden. Just very moving and exciting moment.
I'd like to explain that we all know that Baha'u'llah is the promised one, is the awaited one of the nations of the world, is the King of Kings. As a Christian, I was born a Christian. My parents were Christians of the Church of England. We were always expecting the return of Christ. And we were being taught in our church every time. And at the time I was drawing nigh when Jesus would return to earth, when I ran into a young man, a brilliant young man from Persia, Ali Nakhtubani. It was really Ali who first told me about Baha'u'llah in Kampala, Uganda. And he told me that Baha'u'llah, among other things, had said that he was the promised one of all ages, the return of the divine or spiritual reality of the manifestations of the past. That included Jesus Christ. And that struck me very much. And I was keenly interested to find more. Then Ali told me that it was one of the Baha'i principles that each and every individual should investigate the truth for themselves. So I began to look into it. You know, the future of the African continent or the African people is bright. There's no doubt about that. But I might as well add that Baha'u'llah has come for the people of the world, for the tribes, the races, and the nations of the world. and not for one particular continent or tribe.
Right.
He has come to rebuild the world. Indeed, is the Lord of the world, the Lord of the universe.
That one of the interesting things that I've heard you talk about many times, and that is your love for Mother Dunn.
The two Dunns are quite unique in the sense that Father Dunn gave Mother Dunn the message in the early 1900s, and she was Mrs. Davis in those days, and then in the 1918, after the passing of Mr. Dunn's wife, these two married, and they arose in the call of the Tablets of the Divine Plan and came to Australia. They caused the formation of the National Assembly of Australia. Father Dunn died in 1942, and in 1951, Mother was made a hand. And just at that time also, the Guardian announced that Father Dunn was posthumously regarded as a hand. And when Mother passed away, she was just before, she was to see the temple, and she was within 1 hour's journey. So in Australia, we have two hands of the cause lying together as a joint grave as the pioneers of one of the 5 continents. They're quite unique.
The point that interested me about Mother Dunn was the fact that she said that this was the worst thing that had ever happened to her. She said, you know, I'm so completely unworthy to be a hand. And I wasn't a hand myself at that time, and I said, well, I'm sure all the hands must feel that. But really, it was the beloved Guardian who knew the people.
She had tremendous endowments to be a pioneer with her husband.
I had the privilege also that I met him at the first conclave of the hands here in Holy Land. When she came, she was one of the 26 hands in the first conclave after the ascension of beloved Guardian. That was the first time I met her here. It's wonderful.
John, during the course of your travels, I noticed you've spoken quite a bit along obligatory prayer and prayers in general. Have you found any reaction from the believers?
Oh, yes, I've had some wonderful reaction. Just yesterday, here at this convention, I met a man I hadn't seen for many years, and he's from some country down in northeast Africa. I don't know just what country it is. But he came up to me and he said, oh, Mr. Robards, when you were down in our country 13 years ago, you gave us a talk on the long obligatory prayer. Do you remember it? And I said, yes, I remember it. Well, he said, do you know that from that moment I started saying that prayer, and it has completely changed my life. And he said the wonderful things that have happened. He said, I was ill then, I got over that, I got a new job. It is a tremendous prayer. And it is given to us, I'm sure that Baha'u'llah, when he gave us that prayer as the long obligatory one, he must have had a feeling for that prayer himself, as being a very powerful one. And if we only had time, I would just love to tell you all kinds of stories about that prayer and its effect on the people.
In other words, you've had a lot of reaction.
But I know you've had some reactions yourself. And Jalal here, he's really an enthusiast too on that prayer.
The thing I can say on this subject is that in Bolivia, every morning they come out from their house and they go in the hill back of their house and pray, and that makes them happy. They feel that if they pray, they are succeeded in their business and work. So the prayer works a lot of things among the indigenous people in South America and the other places. So the first thing we did in our institutions, we taught them the prayers.
You know, John, you mentioning the prayer, I've many times reminded the believers that Baha'u'llah has given us obligatory prayers. Now, with obligatory prayers, we have to learn them, so that knowing them without a book. And you know, Baha'u'llah reminds us that we'll remember our life in the next world. So I figure that it must be that if we learn them here by heart and we memorize them, then we can take those prayers with us into the next world. But you know, you can't have your prayer book in your shroud. You can't take it with you. So the necessity for prayer is both for this world and particularly in memorizing, and you've got it again in the next world. In other words, you've got the prayers of the manifestation in the next world.